My bad. The technical difficulties, and we missed a couple minutes in qualifying. But we're currently on board with Luke Locklear, who's about to go in on his second lap for qualifying here, just about to cross the start finish line. He's currently P7 and doesn't seem to improve on his time, and so that's going to keep him there for now. A lot of yellow flags being thrown around, probably for drivers slowing down for other ones, and on the S's potentially guys that are slowing down. Jeffrey Lawler, who's just put it ahead of Hudson Pool at a 128.6. 2 tenths ahead of the Hudson Pool here. Keep an eye on him. I think he's just about to start a fast lap here, and he'll try to increase or decrease, I would say, his lap times. And track evolution during qualifying is quite important during the even the short qualifying. We've noticed it in the across the divisions this weekend. Myself having race last weekend, or should I say last night, in the Division Two. So these drivers will go out for their 2 to 3 laps potentially. And the third lap, you tend to have much better grip, and that will allow you to have better time. So, as I mentioned earlier, I'm mostly expecting these guys' times to drop quite a lot. We may be seeing a potential, um, I would say, oh, as Hudson Pool just gets by Williams that was off track there, maybe we'd see the very low 128s. If I were to give a guess, I think we'd see maybe a 128.3 potentially. Around the hairpin, Hudson Pool goes, and oh, Maxim Bowyer in the Mercedes got a penalty, a 5 place grid penalty for collision with Jeffrey Lawler. That seemed to have happened quite on the 130R, surprisingly. Just around the spoon bend, here comes Hudson Pool. Straight line over there on the 130R, full throttle pass on the left hander. Don't want to let up on that. Coming in on the chicane. Clean exit out of there and taking the line as tight as possible. And there we have it, a 128.6 that puts Hudson Pool at a provisional pole, only 800ths faster than Jeffrey Lawler. So the battle for the division championship between Hudson Pool and Jeffrey Lawler is as tight as you're seeing it right now. All Hudson Pool needs to do is to be ahead of Jeffrey Lawler by the end of the race, and he will have officialized his Division 1 championship tonight. And that is what he's aiming for, clearly. Hudson Pool was seen all week practicing and sharing a lot of comments about this track, which is a bit of a tricky track to get the proper setup on. Given that the Sector 1 S's could be quite tricky to nail, and then you also want to have a lower downforce for the 130R and get as much as high speed as possible, because during the race, that's where most of the overtaking is going to happen. And that's Hudson Pool putting it on P1 for now. And will we see other drivers like the likes of Jeffrey Lawler, Cody Lawrence, or maybe a surprise driver beat the top dog? Special mention to the AlphaTauri, Johnny Sins, who comes out a little bit. I don't know if he invalidated his lap. I think he's harvesting his battery currently, so he's not going to put a much of a lap. I think he's going to be pitting in. So, yeah, as he does, both AlphaTaurs are pitting in. Not a lot of drivers out on track currently. I think we see that is the Aston Martin of Aaron Altmaier, who currently is on his outlap for now. And there's a Ferrari out there, and that is Cody Lawrence. So all these drivers currently, there's the last 3 minutes, they should be coming out of the pits any second now for their last drive around. And as I'm saying that, yeah, we're seeing the Alfa Romeo of Chase Wilson, who's going to get out of there real quick. All right, keep an eye on Aaron Altmaier, who's going to be going out on his fast lap. Or he doesn't, actually. He's coming into the pits. With only 2 minute 40 left. Wasn't happy with his lap, and he's going to be sitting back there with a 129.7, and I don't think he's going to have enough time. It's going to be very tight for him to have enough time to come out of a lap. So that's unfortunate for the Aston Martin driver. Keep an eye on that for now. And right now is where you see most of the drivers coming out of the pits, going for the outlaps. The trick here is to get out of the... They're trying to go for an outlap as late as possible into the qualifying due to the track evolution. Clean through the S's here for Cody Lawrence. He's going to be looking to make up about 2 to 3 tenths time, if not more than that, at least if he's looking at a pole position here. So he seems to be up at his time, and by just over a tenth and a half, and so that's putting him in a decently good position. As it stands now, he would be putting himself P2. Clean out of the hairpin right now. Now here comes what they call the spoon turn, turn 13 and turn 14. Want to take it as wide as possible, but not get too much on the curve. Hug the inside here. Now there seems to be coming up near the rear of a Haas. Hopefully the Haas doesn't get too much in his way. Into the chicane as tight as possible. Clean exit out of there. And that's a 128.7 for Cody Lawrence. So currently still sitting in P3. And that's going to be the end for him for his qualifying already. Man, qualifying short qualities are, as we say, short. And that's Hudson Poole just starting his outlap. Went a little bit wide to go around the McLaren. And whose McLaren is that? The McLaren of AJ Jackson. So he seems to be abandoning his lap. He's invalidated his lap, so AJ Jackson will not improve on his time so far. Hudson Poole will most probably potentially be the latest driver, as well as Jeffrey Lawler. Actually, Jeffrey Lawler's right behind him, so I think he will be the last driver officially to start the fast lap. There's only 5 seconds left in qualifying. Oh, I don't know. No, so 2 drivers were caught off guard. Aaron Altmaier and Stellis Repas will not be able to improve their time. They tried as much as possible, following the train, following their fellow drivers to get past the start-finish line, but it was too late. They just missed it by a second or two, quite literally. And now we have Duncan McCormick at the end of the S's at the Dunlop turn, followed by, I believe that is Chase Wilson. He's driving quite literally. Oh, there you go. I was just about to say he's driving in his dirty air. That'll be difficult to keep that car on track, pushing like that on the qualifying set. And that is the case. So Chase Wilson will not improve on his time, sitting currently P11. Screaming down the 130R, we have Hudson Poole, who's just going for this tight left-hander here, coming up to the chicane. It looks like an invalidated. So he's going down into the pits. Jeffrey Lawler with a 128.4. So that puts him ahead in P1. Provisional pole. Who's left to cross the line? Hudson Poole has invalidated, so he's gone in the pits. Peter Giordano couldn't improve on his time. Johnny Sins, I believe, was the last one to cross the start-finish line. So, ladies and gentlemen, the fight for the championship is as is. So, as I mentioned earlier, and I'm repeating it, Hudson Poole must finish in front of Jeffrey Lawler if he wants to confirm the Division 1 championship. There are other scenarios out there, but that will be the main one I'll keep out there for now. So, that means Jeffrey Lawler, 2/10, just about 2/10 above of Hudson Poole, is going to start on pole. And that race start is going to be as important as it's ever been so far this season. Here are top 10 drivers: Jeffrey Lawler, Hudson Poole, Peter Jadwin, Cody Lawrence. So it's a full Ferrari on the grid on the second line. Luke Locklear put his Alpine in P5. Johnny Sins in the AlphaTauri P6. Quite impressive for an AlphaTauri driver. Jason Pelter and AJ Jackson, both drivers who've shown incredible pace during races, put it in P7 and P8. Marc-Olivier Bassin, the Alfa Romeo P9. Duncan McCamick in P10. That wraps up your top 10 drivers of the race. Ladies and gents, qualifying is over. One of the most important races of the season is just about to happen in a couple seconds. Stay tuned. A reminder to our viewers, there will be no formation lap. So that means the drivers are going to be starting right away. So no time to warm up the tires due to some Codemaster glitches, unfortunately, with tire temperatures being reset. So right now, these guys are thinking about picking their tires, setting their fuel as well. We saw a lot of drivers starting the race with lower fuel than expected. Seems as, depending on their setup, you could be gaining fuel. And as the red lights are out, and away we go already. That's a great start for Jeffrey Lawler. Side by side with Hudson Poole coming down in turn 1. That's the Alpine of Luke Locklear who had a greatest start, and that's a Ferrari who goes a little bit wide. Jeffrey Lawler keeps the position out of turn 1. Hudson Poole following him closely. Luke Locklear is right here in P3. Cody Lawrence in P4. Peter Jano dropping down to P6. Johnny Sins is gained, and he seems to have lost it just as I was about to say his name. He's lost it and spun out on the second part of the S's, and Duncan McCamick finds himself P18. So a lot of switches and position changes so far as the race just started, as it was to be expected, but a clean start from our early drivers, Jeffrey Lawler, Hudson Poole, keeping it in P1 and P2. We have a proper train already forming, and we'll see the gaps start to be created quite early on in the race. And ERS usage is going to be super important. You can generate quite a lot of ERS battery during a lap. And it looks like there's a Mercedes that also had a moment coming out of the hairpin. I believe that is Maxime Beaulieu. Down in P16 now. Luke Locklear is looking all over the back of Hudson Poole's gearbox. He's going to try to gain as much as possible. We see a lot of different kind of setups. I think this is the track where we're going to see a lot of the widest difference of car setups compared to other tracks. And it goes right near to the gearbox to the rear of Hudson Poole. We've seen contact between these two drivers once before. Locklear is able to keep it safe so far. Down in turn 1 goes Luke Locklear, followed by the two Ferraris, and it looks like Locklear's got a higher downforce setup from the looks of things already in the S's. That's where he's getting a lot of times, but we saw down in the 130R and in the main straight kind of having difficulty following Hudson Poole there. And meanwhile, Jeffrey Lawler is slowly starting to pull away, already put himself at a 0.8 second gap. His objective now will be to force as much as possible to be able to get himself a 1 second gap to be away from DRS. Looks like there was another spin in the rear, and that is, I believe, the Williams of Joaquim Torres. I don't know if there's any damage on it. The S's are quite a tricky area to keep the car on track. Your tires have got to be at the peak temperatures as much as possible. And this is already early in the races, and where we've seen a couple spins. Later in the race, when the tire wear is going to be affecting the car's handling, it's going to be really important for these drivers to keep that car on track. That could make the difference between quite a couple positions.
Jason Pelter following closely behind the Ferraris. As we're seeing, is that a full safety car or a virtual safety car? I'm not seeing a yellow dot appearing on the minimap, and that is Joaquin Torres, who seemed to have DNF coming out of Spoon of turn 14. So already in lap 3, and no DRS has been activated. From the pace of thing, it looks like a virtual safety car. Johnny Sins just about to come up behind him. Yeah, so it is going to be a virtual safety car for now. DRS is enabled and green light go. We're back to racing, and Jeffrey Lawler tries to get a jump there on Hudson Pool. And so does Luke Locklear, trying to do that as well on Hudson Pool himself. A lot of tight racing, quite a tight train, all the way down to P16 already. Even some drivers who spun out, at least they didn't have any damage. Locklear's going to try to go on the outside at Pool. Pool holds his position and stops him from doing so. And Locklear knows he's got a higher downforce in the corners, so that's where he's going to be trying to overtake Hudson Pool as much as possible. But Hudson Pool, once they get on the straights, really is able to pull away with the lower downforce settings of his Red Bull. Lawler didn't have a greatest exit out there. Pool behind him is able to catch up on him a little bit. Let's follow up on the Ferraris behind him, Cody Lawrence and Peter Giordano. Giordano has lost 2 positions behind him, so Lawrence is finding himself P4. Ferraris are really just following their, going at their pace and keeping it all together so far. Jason Pelter is going to try as much as possible on his end to split the Ferraris apart. Want to look at the drivers further behind, but it's so tight, and Hudson Pool is all over the back of Jeffrey Lawler, who didn't seem to have a great exit down on the S's. And this could be an important moment in the race. If Jeffrey Lawler were to be overtaken by Hudson Pool, Locklear would... one of two things happens. Either it's a clean overtake and he takes P1, or if Jeffrey and Hudson fight, it opens the door for Luke to be able to just fight him there. And we've seen that happen once before. Clean down the hairpin for most drivers there. So not a lot of overtaker or different positions. Looking at the winners and losers so far, we're in lap 4. We got Seb and P11. Yeah, Seb and P11, who has actually started P17. And the Haas is a D2 driver reserving for Haas, as well as Eric McNerney. Tire-wise, we're still looking at it's very, very split. Half the grid is on hards and half the grid is on mediums. Top 3 drivers, actually the top 2 drivers, Jeffrey and Hudson, all on hards and Locklear on mediums. So that would explain why he's trying to dive in a little bit more on the hairpin, and he's got a later braking area. That could potentially bite him back near the end of the race when there's going to be a switch. So that's why he's driving so aggressively, trying to overtake Pool, and he wants to create a gap for the drivers in front of him as much as possible. And here on this track, the undertaking is not the strongest undertaking, the undercutting. I should say the undercutting is not as strong as it would be in other laps. For example, last weekend in Singapore, saw a lot of drivers undercutting. Japan doesn't tend to be a very friendly undercutting track because of the infamous S's. Once you go out on hards or on new mediums, near the end of the S's, your tires finally get to temperature. It just gives you an idea how quickly your tires heat up in the S's. All these drivers are driving most probably on minimum tire wear or tire pressures right now. Well, Jason Pelter has got to run on Peter Giordano in front of him. He's going to think about it, and he's going to stay clean behind him. So all these drivers are just keeping it clean and following each other, just being very patient on their overtaking opportunities. Not a lot of overtaking has happened so far since the early race start. A.J. Jackson is trying to follow tight behind Marc-Olivier Bastien for battling for P7, and he's used up nearly all of his battery already, as well as Marc-Olivier and the Alfa Romeo as well. A lot of drivers have been managing their ERS a lot. We're seeing ERS already at 80%, 50%. Most of the time early in the race, we see drivers really using up their ERS more than that. As I mentioned earlier, Japan allows you to really grind that energy recovery, and so you get a lot of battery usage throughout the entire race. So no changes on the top positions. Still, it's Jeffrey Lawler leading the race, followed closely behind by Hudson Poole and Luke Locklear. There was a battle. Is that a battle for P11, P10? And that's side by side with Seb and Stelios Repas. Seb takes the inside of the curb here and is going to come out ahead of Stelios and the Alpha Tauri. He's going to try to get a better exit there. Quite a great overtake from Seb, and that leaves Stelios a little bit vulnerable to drivers behind him, and he's already followed closely behind by Eric McNerney, sitting currently in P12, and Aaron Altmaier, who's all over the rear, and he's a driver that wants to be let loose. Aaron Altmaier and Duncan McCamick, two drivers, the battle in front of them is slowing them down, and as we can see, there's already a gap forming, starting from P10 all the way back, so Seb's, was able to overtake, but doing so in fighting, he's created a gap of a 2.6 second gap between him and Major Castleman in P9. The quality of the racing so far between P1 all the way down to these guys. Oh, and Adam McLaren that's having a moment. Oh, that is AJ Jackson who's spun around. Does he have damage? Yes, he's missing his left-hand wing plate on his front wing, so he's going to have to come into pits. And that's really unfortunate for the driver because he's on 6-lap-old hards. He's going to have to make a switch, and I could tell you the mediums will not last 20 laps. We're most probably looking for... he's going to go for mediums and pray for a safety car later in the race to be able to switch back to either the hards again or maybe even the softs, depending on when the safety car could happen. So that's unfortunate for AJ Jackson. Having a moment there and losing a lot of positions, that's putting him completely out of the train here. Again, Luke Locklear trying to take a look maybe at the chicane, and something tells me that he's being maybe a bit more cautious, and he's trying his best not to make any contact with the Hudson Poole. There's already been situations happening between those two drivers. He has the tire advantage for now, but eventually it's going to be the reverse situation. Those medium tires are going to fall off. Expect the medium tire drivers to pit in around lap 12. They could go a little bit earlier, a little bit later, but it should normally be around lap 12, while the hard tire drivers should be pitting, again, close to around lap 15, depending on the situation. And that's a yellow flag. Is that Aaron Altmaier, who's spun, and he's lost a lot of positions, puts him back down to P14, but AJ Jackson in the back of him, who's not pitted for a wing, his engineer should probably be letting him know, you don't normally race with a missing end plate. That's definitely affecting your downforce a lot in the S's here. Might be waved the black and orange flag eventually to be told to go into the pits. Two very separate kind of races so far for the Aston Martin drivers. Jeffrey Lawler is leading in P1, while Aaron Altmaier, who's probably provided the setup for the Aston Martin, is currently driving in P14. That whole mid-pack from P4 all the way down, I would say, to P7, maybe even P8, they're really being patient with each other, not going into crazy dive bombs or trying to do overtakes just now. I think they're just waiting for the driver to make a mistake, and that's when they're going to make them pay for that mistake. Not a lot of changes that's happened so far in the... ever since the beginning of the race. That's Luke Locklear who's having a moment. Oh, that is Luke who spun it. I was just talking about those medium tires degrading and going down, and he spins off again. A terrible moment there for Luke Locklear. I don't know if there was contact, if he tried to make a move and that was causing the spin. Doesn't look like he's got damage, but most definitely his tires are not happy with him. Will he decide to go for an early pit stop, given the fact that he's burned up his rear tires and is now sitting in P13 due to that spin? All throughout the weekend, we saw multiple drivers having spins, especially in the S's. With these kind of cars, you have to be extremely smooth on your steering input. It is not easy to keep that car on track, especially if you're trying to have higher top speeds on 130R for the overtakes. You sacrifice downforce down into Sector 1, and that could really bite you in the rear. And that definitely relieves pressure for Hudson Poole, who's so far just sitting behind Jeffrey Lawler, being very patient about his race, and now he doesn't have to worry about Luke Locklear all over the rear of him. And now that's created a bit of a gap between him and Cody Lawrence and Jason Pelto, who's actually overtook Peter Giordano. Sorry, I missed that. And Maxime Beaulieu has a penalty, has a spin, and now a 5-second penalty for speeding in the pits, and I believe he's followed closely by A.G. Jackson, who's getting his wing replaced and is now putting in what should be... Yeah, so he's going in for the medium tires. I thought he had started on mediums, but no, he started on hard, so he's already on the medium tires. He's going to try to go 17 laps on medium tires, and I can guarantee you that is going to put him in puncture territory. Last night, Division 2, we had two drivers actually, before the end of the last lap, actually have flat tires or punctures. So that's something we could potentially see tonight, depending on will a safety car affect the strategy or spins or incidents like we've seen throughout the race so far. Jason Pelter last weekend in Singapore finally had a podium, currently sitting P4. I believe he started the race in P6 or P7? In P7, so he's gained 3 positions since the beginning of the race so far. And it's fun, and the Ferraris were following closely with each other, just going about their strategy, and he split them up together, so... And soon the Ferrari strategists are going to have to be discussing how are we going about for the pitting strategy. It's lap 11, the medium tires. Normally we should see drivers going for the pitting around lap 12. We're seeing Luke Locklear just coming out of the pits right now, who's just put on some fresh hards. And he's coming out behind the AlphaTauri of Johnny Sins. So Ferrari's going to have to try to figure out who pits first. And when and if they try to even go for a double stack. Obviously, they're on hard tires, so they got a couple laps to go. Should be around lap 15 for their pits. Quick overview of the race. Now, we're seeing different group of cars starting to split apart. Much more spread around than we've seen earlier in the race. Jeffrey Lawler still's got the lead in P1. Hudson Poole following him closely. Around 6 tenths behind him. 5 and 6 tenths behind him. They're really following each other with a very similar pace, and both of them got a very similar ERS deployment, so not really going too hard on each other. We know we got some more pace there. Seems like both drivers, knowing the importance of the championship going on, they want to be careful about their race. They don't want any spins, they don't want any bad lucks or anything happening to them. And speaking of bad luck, Seb with a 5-second penalty for speeding in the pit lane. He's been having a great race so far. And he is going in for the hard tires. So he's just began lap 12. Great stop there. And that's going to take him out of the... Oh, is he going to come out in front of the Mercedes? I believe he's going to be in front of the Mercedes of Maxime Beaulieu, who's coming up right behind him. But Maxime Beaulieu, in that situation, could catch up to him. Now we'll see how much it'll affect with the tire wear. I believe that's Duncan McCamick we saw who triggered a yellow flag in sector 1 near the end of the S's. So he's dropped that back down to P9. And as you can see, Maxim Boulder is hard on the ERS. He wants to catch up to Seb. He's got the better pace. Seb's tires are just warming up. Not exactly up to pace right now, and he's going to be coming down his gearbox there. Going to try to maybe make a move down in the hairpin. Gets much tighter to him, and Seb's got a better exit now. And at this point, Seb's tires should be up to temperature, just about. And there's another battle ahead for P10. Major Castleman, who's got fresh tires as well, is being chased down by none other than Chase Wilson in the Alfa Romeo, who had a great race last weekend too. Eric McNerney is one of the last drivers. McNerney and Johnny Sins. Well, Johnny Sins had to pit earlier in the race, but McNerney is now the last driver to pit for his medium tires. Oh, Chase Wilson as well. So Wilson actually in P11 is going to try to go the long game a little bit with his medium tires. We're now starting lap 13 and he hasn't pitted yet. And the danger with that is drivers potentially pushing their cars a little bit too hard, or the tire degradation being so much that it's just not worth it trying to do the overcut. So we'll see if Chase Wilson's strategy pays out for him. Hudson Poole was about 6 tenths behind Jeffrey Lawler. He's cut the gap just a little bit. Around 4 tenths to 5 tenths. And that's a Sector 1 flag. That's AJ Jackson and the McLaren. Fresh medium tires, only 3 lap olds, and he spun in the S's. And he spins again. He puts it into the wall. Oh, that looks like there's a missing piece of wing there. And that's unfortunate for him. So AJ Jackson not having the time of the race of his life right now. Struggling with keeping the car on the road. Halfway through the race about already. And that is unfortunate for McLaren. Duncan McCamick, sitting in P8, was the first driver officially to be given a 3-second time penalty for cutting the track too often. Duncan McCamick's trying to recover from the spin he had earlier, and he's a little bit in no man's land. He's got a driver ahead of him, about 7 seconds ahead, and behind him, he's got a driver that's way behind him. Chase Wilson also with a 5-second penalty for speeding in the pit lane. These guys are a little bit too fast in the pit lane, and that's going to be counted at the end of the race against them. Jason Pelter was holding up Peter Giordano, and Marc-Olivier Bassin was not too far behind them. Seems to have a gap been created between Cody Lawrence and Jason here. So there's another Sector 3 yellow flag, and they're coming up with him. I believe that's again AJ Jackson, who's DNF. So AJ Jackson just retired the car at the end of 130R. I think he's actually, I'm seeing a wheel in the middle of the track there. I don't know if he's actually parked the car or he's actually crashed it. Quite an odd area to crash it. Be curious to see if that was not maybe an intention here to potentially trigger a safety car. And that's Hudson Poole, who's got the run on Jeffrey Lawler and it's taken P1. However, from what I'm seeing here, Hudson Poole's got a 3-second time penalty. So yeah, he's overtaken Jeffrey Lawler for P1 on track. But if Jeffrey is able to keep within that 3-second gap, he'll gain the win anyways. But at the end of the day, I believe that's the better position you want to be if you're Hudson Poole, because he's going to be a driver that's going to be looking to extend that gap and really be let loose completely. But I don't think Jeffrey Lawler is going to let that happen. He's really close up behind him at the hairpin. Going down to turn 12, coming up to the spoon curve. It'll be important for Jeffrey to get the best exit out of there. he doesn't quite do it. They're just really on par with Jeffrey Lawler's time, keeping it around, actually losing a little bit of time to him. Lost about a tenth there at the end of 130R. So Hudson Pool's trying the undercut on Jeffrey Lawler. So see if that strategy pays out. I was saying earlier that the undercut isn't the best strategy on Suzuka. If there's somebody that can make it work, it's definitely Hudson Pool, who's gone on the medium tires and now pitted on early lap 16. So he's going to have 11 laps to go on these medium tires. Jeffrey Lawler's going to probably want to pit at the very end of this lap right now. The tires, right now, the hard tires with 15 laps to go are probably around the 60-65% area of degradation. So now we're seeing the beginning of the hard tire drivers, going in front to the pits for their strategies. So Jeffrey Lawler hasn't pit yet. He might be looking to do so very soon. Cody Lawrence has not pit either. Jason Pelter and Marc-Olivier Basset. So the top 4 drivers have not pitted yet. Duncan McCamick is going to have to look for pitting as well. So both Red Bull drivers with 3-second penalties. Hudson Pool just pitted for the mediums. So a lot of drivers were rather early on pitting for their hard tires already. Actually, no, so I should say some drivers were early on their medium tires, actually. And there we have it. So we have Jeffrey Lawler down in the pits. I think behind him is Marc-Olivier Basset. So 2 drivers who've not gone in the pits yet. Cody Lawrence and Jason Pelter, they're going to try the overcut. We're going to keep our eyes here at Jeffrey Lawler, where he's going to come out of the pits. Hudson Pool's right behind him, and he's going to go over him. And guy goes right by him, really tight on turn 1. And that's where Jeffrey Lawler is going to lose a lot of time to Hudson Pool. And he's going to have to be very careful here around the S's. His tires are not up to temperature. You're already seeing Hudson Pool pulling away. Already a second gap created between the 2 drivers. So, despite having a couple moments and spins, we're seeing drivers like Aaron Altmaier and Luke Locklear. We're used to seeing these drivers a lot further out the grid, sitting currently in P13 for Luke and Aaron in P14, not really having the recovery race they hope to be. And so far, after a couple spins early in the race, I think the drivers quickly, or their engineers probably told them to maybe be a little bit lighter on the throttle on certain areas of the track to avoid some spins. Given the fact that a lot of drivers were caught off guard and spun around, and once you spin in Suzuka, depending on where you spin, especially in the S's, there's a large area off the track. There's a lot of runoff area, I should say. So it's could be difficult coming back on track, and then the tires, because we've seen guys are spinning around even more. Hudson Pool, fastest lap of the race so far, 131.1. Oh, and is that... I was talking about Luke Locklear a second ago. Is that Luke Locklear, who's DNF, coming out of Spoon? Turn 14, and there's an Alpine sideways on the track, and this is a virtual... It's another virtual safety car, so as what I can see so far. I'm very shocked and very surprised it's not a full safety car. That Alpine was completely sideways on a straight line there. Missing a tire. Oh, how unfortunate for the Alpine driver, Luke Locklear. And that is over for him. Am I seeing what I think I'm seeing? Aaron Altmaier is going to try 10 laps, or just about 10 laps, on the soft tires. We've seen that strategy done last night in Division 2. And that's what I was mentioning earlier in the race. Some drivers might be closer to puncture territory than others. And being 10 laps on soft tires could potentially put him in puncture territory. So we will see about that. Virtual safety car is now disabled, and back to racing we go. Hudson Poole gets a good start. Jeffrey Lawler is trying to use all of the ERS he's got. At the moment, sitting the way we are sitting now, if the race was to end, I'm not quite sure the championship would be won because of Hudson Poole's 3-second time penalty. But even if, for example, if there wasn't a penalty or if he created that gap and Hudson Poole won the race, it would be an officially Division 1 race championship race win. So we'll keep close tabs on that battle so far. Jeffrey Lawler's all over the back of the Red Bull. He's trying to keep it as tight as possible and trying to use his ERS as much as possible. And on the contrary, Hudson seems to be really gathering ERS so far, using it really strategically so that Lawler doesn't get the run on him. Let's not forget, there's only a single DRS zone here, and that's on the main straight. So even on 130R, because of that long curve at such a high speed, they've not implemented a DRS zone on that sector. Jason Pelter currently sitting P4. He's got a couple drivers behind him. Peter Giordano in the Ferrari, Marco-Olivier Basset in the Alfa Romeo, and Major Castman, who's having a better race in the Alpine compared to his compatriot. So currently having a decent race. And we have a Haas. That is the Haas of Seb, who's spun out. Don't see any damage. He's spun around around the Denger curve and around turns 8 and 9. Doesn't seem to have any damage, so maybe took a little bit too much curve that he intended. And that looks like it's the same thing for Johnny Sins, who spun out exactly right under the bridge at the same place in Seb as well. Both drivers, no damage, just spinning around on that from taking too much curve, I would presume there. Checking back on Jeffrey Lawler and Hudson Poole. Jeffrey's right behind the Red Bull still. Caught up a little bit on the straight due to the DRS zone, but that's about as close as he's going to get. As Hudson's going to... So far, he's getting a better... is gaining time on him on the S's. Cody Lawrence is harvesting ERS. He's also in a no man's land. Just stuck in between the top two drivers in the rear pack. So he's in a podium position, but he's having a bit of a lonely race so far. Don't think you have seen him fight or struggle or anything. I think he's actually started in P3, and that's where he's been since. Or he's gained a position, sorry. So he started in P4, and now he's in P3. So that's been since the very start of the race, actually. Maxime Beaulieu, despite having a penalty, is sitting in P8. That's 10 positions up. He started P18. We've got 3 DNFs so far. Just a reminder that we've got 2 drivers who are currently serving race bans. That was Eric Perez of the Williams, as well as the Eric Cavallo of the Mercedes. Perez was given an unsportsmanlike penalty points, and that gave him enough penalty points for a race ban due to an incident that happened in Singapore during qualifying last weekend. And Eric Cavallo was just too many penalty points for different incidents throughout the season, and now he's racing his serving his race ban. Jeffrey Lawler's as close as he's gotten so far to Hudson Poole down in turn 1. He was just up against him. Same scenario once again. In the S's, Hudson Poole's already given himself a 4/10 gap, and it's just climbing. He's going to hit a 5/10 in just a second here. So these drivers are really trying their best, and Suzuka has a very technical track, especially near the end of the S's. We're at lap 21 out of 27. This race is flying by. No real safety cars slow down the pace of the race so far, and these guys are just flying on track. These guys, with their tires being used up, and we're probably hitting around the 40-50%, or just about, depending on which tire they've chosen. So they're trying to push as hard as possible, maybe gain time on their competitors or whatnot, but they also got to be careful not to spin that car around. We've seen the Denger curves, and really turn 7, 8, and 9 is where most of the spins has happened. And there's a Haas around in the just after the hairpins. That's Eric McNerney, the reserve driver for Haas, who's spun around there. kept it on track and doesn't seem to have any damage. So that is just a little bit of oversteer who caused him to spin, coming out of the hairpin, maybe a little bit with too much throttle. Just beginning lap 22, Hudson Poole, Jeffrey Lawler. There's no real change of situation there so far. Cody Lawrence still slowly catching up to them. Maybe as 4.6 seconds, 3 seconds. Sorry, from the leaders. So if Hudson Poole and Jeffrey Lawler end up battling it out, they could allow potentially Cody to catch up to them and maybe insert himself into the race. Jason Pelter is also having a great race so far, sitting in P4, holding off Peter Giordano on the Ferrari and also the Alfa Romeo of Marc-Olivier Basset there in P6. Major Castleman is trying to keep up with them, but he's maybe a little bit too far off. I don't think he is. He's not in DRS zone for the Alfa Romeo driver ahead of him, so he's going to have to try to catch up to that. Maxime Beaulieu is having quite a race so far. And what has happened? Is that Broadcaster's Curse? Yep, that's Broadcaster's Curse. Of course I did that. Major Castleman, as I've just taken the camera off of him, has spun. And is that due to damage, or is there another car that's completely DNF somewhere? And we actually have a safety car. So Major Castleman, due to the excess of debris on the track, I guess Luke Locklear was considered a debris with his Alpine sitting sideways across 130R, has now triggered a safety car with 5 laps to go in the race. Jeffrey Lawler, Hudson Poole have not pitted, so they're going to stick on their medium tires so far. Cody Lawrence is doing the same. Jason Pelter as well, and Peter Giordano and Marc-Olivier Basset. Will other drivers looking to go into the pits, and that's what Maxime Beaulieu does, diving into the pits, and I would presume he is going for the softs, and yes, he is. He's got to serve a 5-second time penalty, so that's going to be served right now, which is the best moment to serve that kind of penalty is during safety cars. So Maxime Beaulieu coming out of the pits. Let's see how much time he's lost to his competitor, Stelios Repos, who's going to come out in front of him on the soft tires in P7, Maxime Beaulieu in P8, and Major Castleman, despite his wing being ripped off, is out there in P9, so not too much of a catastrophe for him locally. Duncan McCamick, who's maybe we're not used to seeing Duncan McCamick being so far down the track so far in P10, and he's been sitting around there most of the time, so not the best race for him so far, but still got plenty of time to make things move. That's the Haas of Eric McNerney, also out on softs, and Chase Wilson, Seb. Actually, every single driver from P7 down to P15 are on soft tires. This race is not over, guys. And if Hudson Poole at this moment is probably the worst situation for him with his 3-second time penalty, if the cars are all bunched up like that, he would lose multiple positions, and the championship battle, if the race win goes to Jeffrey Lawler, would live on for a final showdown round with a sprint race and a full race in COTA in USA. This race, I would say, has just begun. We've had a rather tame race so far throughout the whole night. Not that many overtakes. A lot of battling, but just following each other and sizing each other up. No real wheel-to-wheel action. We've had a couple battles, but nothing too crazy. Now we've got the top 6 drivers who are going to start racing. Probably, I would presume, 2 more laps of the safety car. So we're gonna have a motor race, ladies and gentlemen. And a lot of drivers out there on the soft tires could potentially have the jump on the medium tire drivers. I'm saying we've got a couple viewers out here, so type in the chat who is going for the win tonight. Barney Goatmere says Johnny Sins wins this 100%. Johnny Sins, sitting in P15, had a really good qualifying. Unfortunately, not that much of a good race for him so far. I don't think he'll go for the win, but we're curious to see. He's shown he's got some pace, so will he be able to gain positions on his fellow rivals? disappointment as well for Aaron Altmaier. And Altmaier is, I'm wondering if he went only for 2 laps, if he's used 2 soft tires for his qualifying or 3, because I believe this is his second pair of soft tires, so he must have had some new tires already. Otherwise, he might have switched to a different kind of compound. No indication yet that the safety car is going in. Gonna keep an eye on it. We still got the last 3 drivers, Seb, Aaron, and Johnny, just catching up to the pack there. So we might have to wait another extra lap, and that means another extra lap of those tires being used up and having to weave around, keep the heat on those medium tires, which might not be as easy as it looks. Suzuka the tires tend to really cool down rather quickly. At least from my experience last night, that's what it was. I believe I didn't get any indication. I believe safety car is going in. Hudson Pools really made himself a gap. And yeah, safety car is in this lap. We've just found out right here. So we're going to keep on board with Jeffrey Lawler. See if we could get... Oh, he goes side by side with Hudson. And there's contact. What's going on? Hudson pulls off. There's contact right before the restart. Jeffrey Lawler was not behind Hudson. He was completely side by side. And Hudson was still weaving and heating his tires up. And Hudson spun off. What's happened? Cody Lawrence going on in turn 2, fighting for Jeffrey Lawler side by side, but Jeffrey Lawler is going to come out of there. So far as a victor, Cody Lawrence in P2, Jason Pelton P3, Hudson Pools gone down to P10. Oh, that's going to be something that's going to have to be reviewed from the stewards. So, as we saw in the real life, maybe it's going to be a post-race penalty that might have a major effect on the standings. Now, why was Jeffrey Lawler completely sideways, side by side on the Red Bull? This is the Max Verstappen rule that was banned this year in the season. You have to stay behind the drivers. So Jeffrey Lawler clearly jumped the gun, found himself sitting beside Hudson Poole, and Hudson turned right into him as he was still keeping his tires warm. Definitely something that's going to be overlooked for, but right now we still have 3 laps of racing. So currently, for now, Jeffrey Lawler is in P1. Cody Lawrence is all over the rear of him, so just 4/10 off. He's going to try to overtake him near the chicane. Catching up to Jeffrey Lawler as much as possible here. Looks for maybe the inside, late braking, but he doesn't. Keeps it clean behind Jeffrey. DRS will not be labeled this lap. It's going to be next lap only, so he's going to try to keep behind him as much as possible. Aaron Altmaier has dropped down to P15 so far. Maxime Beaulieu, who's been having a great race so far and also served his 5-second time penalty, is sitting in P6. He's gained 12 positions. Most definitely the driver of the day so far. He started P18, is now driving P6, and he's all over the rear of Marc-Olivier Bastien, wanting to overtake for P5, and that's far from over so far. A lot of chatter about who's at fault. Is it Jeffrey Lawler or Hudson Poole in this incident? That's going to be something that's definitely going to be looked at and going to be the chatter for the rest of the week, because depending on the situation here, it could have a direct impact on who wins the championship. Will we have an extra round in round 12 at USA to determine, or will it be officially determined post-race due to penalties? Johnny Sins completely off and dropped to P15, so he's had a moment. I don't know if he had contact there. An unusual place to spin off, and doesn't seem to have damage, and that's pretty much ruined his race. So whoever called Johnny Sins for the win, it ain't happening. Still holding on for the lead is Jeffrey Lawler. Cody Lawrence is close behind him. He's used up a lot more ERS than Lawrence so far. So that is DRS that is enabled and only will be available next lap. But that's it. It's lap 27 already. So it's basically a whole motor race without any DRS. Seb in P13 gets a 3-second time penalty for cutting the track. Marc-Olivier Bastien had a moment because he's dropped down to P8 and Maxime Beaulieu is now in P6. Major Castleman P5 and Maxime's going to try to make a move there to finish his gains from P18 to P6, maybe to P5, and that's what he's aiming for currently. Jason Pelter could potentially, and I don't want to say the P word because I might jinx him, but we're close to maybe a potential second podium in a row. If he could bring that car home. Sector 2 looks like there's another incident that's happened. Is that Hudson Poole? That is. It's Hudson Poole in P14. His race is completely derailed. Completely. So even after penalties, given the fact that he's so far down, I could confirm, I would strongly be able to confirm, we will have an ultimate round at the very last race this season. Ladies and gents, USA sprint race, full race. You're going to want to tune in next weekend Sunday at 10 p.m. EST. Coming out of the chicane, that's Jeffrey Lawler, who's going to win despite the incident. On track, he's won the Japanese Grand Prix, followed closely behind by Cody Lawrence, who wasn't able to overtake him. And that is Peter Giordano and Major Castleman, who finished side by side. Jason Pelter P3, Peter Giordano just right behind, and was a photo finish between him and Major Castleman. Maxime Beaulieu, the driver of the day, most potentially finishing in P6. And we'll see the rest of the grid following in a minute. Maxime Beaulieu, driver of the day, had a penalty against Peter Giordano. Might be looked at over during quali. Served a 5-place grid penalty. Started on the back of the pack and finishes P6. A race that just seemed very normal completely turned into something spectacular at the very end of the race. And I'm at a loss for words at how Hudson probably feels right now. And I'm thinking even Lawler. Lawler is not the kind of driver who would, purposely do that kind of contact. So this is something that's going to have to be reviewed over and over by stewards, and this is going to be quite a discussion, I would assume, tomorrow when the stewards speak together. And that is your top 10. So Jeffrey Lawler, Cody Lawrence, Jason Pelter, Peter Giordano, Major Castleman, Maxime Beaulieu, Marc-Olivier Bastien, P7, Stelios Repas and AlphaTauri. Great race for him. P8. Eric Murney in the Haas and P9 in front of the Red Bull of Duncan McCamick in P10. Chase Wilson, Aaron Altmaier, Seb and Hudson Poole in the back, and Hudson and Johnny Sins in P15. Locklear, AJ Jackson and Joaquim Torres have DNF'd. Our top 3 drivers, our podium drivers, Jeffrey Lawler, Cody Lawrence, and Jason Pelter, will be ready for us in the waiting room to join the broadcast and have the post-race interview in just a moment. Just going to set this up. Quite a finish by the drivers and rather dramatic. So we're not going to wait any longer. We're going to take Jason Pelter. Jason Pelter, our P3 finisher, a second podium in a row. Jason, how are you feeling tonight? All right, speaking. All right, yeah, so absolutely not expecting that. Jason, you've had an amazing race. You did pretty decent in qualifying, and suddenly you find yourself behind a safety car up there. So what was the strategy? What was going on behind your head once the safety car hit and you were on medium tires still, and drivers behind you were still were going on the soft tires? How do you feel about those? Did you worry that the soft runners would maybe catch up to you near the end of the race? All right, sorry, Jason. I just want to do a quick sound check. I think we missed a part of your interview at this moment. Okay, for some reason I don't seem to have you. But Jason, so you were saying that you were not expecting the soft tire runners. Were you actually maybe scared that they were going to catch up to you? So you're sitting there in P3, and that's giving you quite a gap between you and your closest rival, who did not race in the standings. Who's now sitting in P3 in the driver standings. P4 is Eric Carvalho, who did not race tonight. So I'm not sure you're looking at P2 to beat either Jeffrey Lawler or Hudson Poole at this moment, but that's solidifying your P3 position. How are you feeling? There's only one race to go. There's still also a sprint race where you could get a lot of points. How are you concluding this season, staying as focused as possible? What are your plans for the upcoming week? Yep. So a long week of practicing ahead of you, and you know you're able to get a proper pace and Coda. Good luck to you for the upcoming race, Jason. Congratulations for your second P3 in a row. That's a podium for you, my friend. All right, thank you. So we'll go for our P2 finisher in just a moment here. I'm just aware there's some audio glitches, so just give me 1 second to make sure the audio is good, and I'll be with you in just a moment. All right, we should be good with our P2 finisher here, so I'm going to bring in Cody Lawrence here. Cody Lawrence, that's a P2 for you. You saw that incident right up close. You were at the first, you had first row seat to see the incident between Hudson Poole and Jeffrey Lawler. Give us your review. Give us your take on that. What happened out there?
Well, I'll start by giving you a bit of a race recap. Honestly, I think Jeffrey and Hudson just had the pace on me today. Overall, like I was trying to do something different, go off sequence with a little bit newer tire in case something like a late race restart happens, and then you had the incident like you were talking about, and me and Jeffrey were literally just discussing it right before you pulled me in here. Man, I don't know. I could see both of them being at fault to a point. You know what I mean? Like, Dago went side by side, Jeffrey went side by side. Hudson kind of got start and stop. I'm not like making an opinion. I'm just kind of explaining what I saw on my end. And I mean, in my mind, I was like, I'm just gonna lay back and see if I can maybe time this restart on them, and got close into one, but that's about all I had really. I just didn't quite have the pace on a short run. On a long run, maybe, but on a short run, just not enough, really.
Yeah, they were really running away with it up at front, and you once again, you have I believe this is your third race. You joined in officially in the Division 1 since Mexico, and you're showing incredible pace once again. We're nearing the end of the season, and we're looking at the standings, and what are your thoughts on your potential next seed? Do you think you're going to be staying with Ferrari, or already having discussions with team principals about being picked on another seed? Has that been anything upcoming for you?
Well, no silly season rumors just yet from the other team principals. I haven't had any talk like that. Me and Peter talked about it once, but honestly, I'm just trying to decide if I want to keep racing on the game, truth be told. like, I'll drive for any team, but I need to figure out if I want to drive this game for another 3 or 4 months, which however long the next season is. But yeah, I mean, there's some questions I need to answer. One with this game, two with this race, because I was just missing a little something today, and that's kind of what stings at me more than the long term. You're thinking long term, and I'm thinking, how did I lose 2 or 3 tenths a lap to the big quali and maybe a tenth or two in the race? So I don't know. We're wish I had a better answer for you on that, but yeah, there's some things I got to figure out for that race.
Interesting. Some things you have to figure out, and that leads me to ask you this next question: could this be used as motivation, where we could potentially see Cody Lawrence fighting for wins ahead of Hudson Poole and Jeffrey Lawler and the likes of these guys? Would that be a goal for next season?
Well, that's the target. That's always the target. I'm going in thinking I'm going to try to win this race somehow, some way. Hope the chips fall my way if I don't have the speed, and if I've got the speed, use it, you know? And today I didn't have that speed, and yeah, sometimes that's a bit of motivation, but there's just some stuff I think on my end that I need to figure out, whether that's just how I'm driving the car, how I'm approaching the race, how I'm thinking about the quali laps, because qualifying I just kind of disappeared. I was way happier in practice than what I did in the session, but race was basically where I was in practice. As soon as after about lap 10, I really finally got into the laps I was doing in practice, and it still wasn't enough. So maybe a little bit of motivation in saying let's figure out how to close that gap, but otherwise just kind of understanding it. It sounds very analytical, but like that's the best way to describe it, truthfully.
Yeah, and there's definitely some thought that's got to go into it, and indeed next season is going to be another 12 race season. It's going to be a long one as well. So Cody, congratulations on your P2. I'll let you celebrate with your Ferrari teammates, and we'll see you next week in Coda.
Awesome, thank you, sir.
All right, we're going in with our race winner, Jeffrey Lawler. Jeffrey Lawler, welcome to the booth. You've won that race on the track, but we both know what's coming up next. You want to talk to us a little bit how that played out on the safety car restart? What happened there?
So basically, the whole race had more pace. He just used the ERS, and the ERS to stick with me. He got a penalty right before he pitted, so I just knew I just had to stick with DRS, so I didn't bother to fight him. Safety car came late, and he slammed on the brakes because of the delta, which wasn't his fault. But as soon as I seen him brake, I braked too, and I couldn't let him back pass. So we had to talk to their engineer, and they were just like, if you drive off track, it'll let him pass. So I drove in the dirt, let him pass in the safety car. And then the lap we knew it was going to come in. I guess he thought it already told him it was coming in, and he dropped back like 40 car lengths. And he just stayed back, and he was at like 130R when it was at the chicane, and then he realized he was going to get a penalty, I guess it told him. And then he sped up after slowing down, got to safety car, then it told him he could go, he slowed down again. And then I guess he had the throttle thing or something, because he like slowed down and didn't accelerate. So to not hit him, I went to the left, stayed there, didn't move, and then I guess he tried to warm his tires again, and then he just drove right into me and he spun himself out. So there's no rule against being against somebody in the restart, and he took himself out during the race, so sad we couldn't fight for the win. I mean, either way, he had a penalty, but
yeah, I think it's going to be overlooked with the stories. We know there isn't an in real life rule in regards to what we call the Max Verstappen rule, where he would go side by side a driver, and you'll have to look into the rule book. Has that been implemented in the league or not? And then we'll have to judge between that. So that's going to be quite a discussion and quite an allies we got to do, despite the fact whether you get a penalty or not, whether it's your fault, whether it's not Hudson Poole's fault. The end result, unless there's a drastic decision that's taken out there, but the end result is Hudson Poole's dropped down to P14, and that means we're going to have an ultimate race potentially, or actually we are going to have an ultimate round in USA, because there are there's many points up for grabs, given the fact there's also a sprint race and a full race. How are you viewing this this COTA race that's coming up next weekend? Are you... maybe early in the season we spoke about it. You didn't look really too confident about getting P1. Now suddenly it's right there in your grasp. Is that your target now?
I was never confident at all any point in the season and being anywhere in the standings or finishing anywhere in the race. It's just having that consistency, and I've definitely had some races where I didn't have that. So if I can keep it up for these last couple races, I mean, I might be able to pull it off. But I mean, Hudson practices week in, week out, and I don't. So if he doesn't win, it would actually be surprising. But I can believe how much more pace I had than everybody else here. So yeah, the points are gonna finish like this. We literally went over the restart rules during the race, and there was nothing. So I mean, the race will finish like this. Tough day for Hudson, but I mean, what can you do?
Yeah, it's something that's gonna be discussed and looked at, but at the end of the day, indeed, it was while warming his tires that when the contact happened. So it's.
I really don't even think
yeah.
that was the problem. Like Retro said
Yeah.
in chat, it was really the throttle limiter. If he didn't have that problem, I
Mhm.
wouldn't have to dodge him when he kept slowing down even more because he stopped, and Cody was right behind me and everyone else, and we were all confused when he spun out. Nobody went. We weren't sure what to do.
Yeah, that was quite an interesting situation there. So, well, definitely. So that gives you the win for tonight, Jeffrey. So congratulations on P1, and good luck for next weekend because next weekend is going to be a big one. The sprint race qualifying as well as the full race. So there's still a lot of points for grabs, and the championship is still up there for grabs as well. And it's really between you and Hudson Pool at this moment.
Wait, is next week's the last race, or is there another one?
Next week is the last race in USA.
Is it full quality?
It is a sprint race quali. So
okay.
yeah, the sprint race qualifying is gonna be short quali followed by sprint race and then a full race. So there's extra points up to grabs. That is why you're still in contention.
Well, we'll see. I just hope it's fun. If I lose, I lose. I don't really care. It just puts a smile on my face when everybody in chat starts talking.
Well, you're gonna have everybody talking the entire week, so I'm pretty sure you have a big smile on your face right now.
Hey, I love it. Especially people that couldn't even show up and got banned. You know what I'm saying? It puts even a bigger smile on my face when they get to run in their mouth. But hey, some people, this is their life. So.
All right. Well, you've earned bragging rights for tonight, Jeffrey Lawler. Congratulations on the P1 race tonight. We'll see you next week.
Hey, thank you for commenting by yourself.
Thank you. Bit of a challenge.
Yeah. But take care, man. I'll see you.
Take care. So that was Jeffrey Lawler, our on-race winner in Japan, which created quite some controversy so far in the chat. It's something that's going to be overlooked once again by stewards. Next week, you can tell these drivers are excited. Next week in USA. So just a reminder, Division 1 is at 10 p.m. Eastern next Sunday. We're going to have a short quali, a sprint qualifying race, and then the full race as we usually have. And it's going to be the race that is going to determine officially who is going to be the Division 1 champion between Hudson Pool and Jeffrey Lawler. So tune in. We'll see you next week, everybody. Thanks for being with us. Good night.